And if I sat in a chair all day, I would start to mold into a chair. So I am at a stand-up desk and I like that. Be sure to turn off your cell phone and get ready to write. We're going to create, tell, and write your authentic stories. I want to thank Marielle for helping me today with my chats and all the slides that I have to get done. Today's money back guarantee. Now I have to put a caveat here. It's free, so there's no money involved. But by the end of this webinar, you can write an energetic, creative December letter or story. You'll have to admit the year's been a little complicated and we're stuck at home. So why don't you end the year on a positive note? Write a great story or a December letter and send it to friends and family to show that you survived the year and so can they. And next year's going to be better. Your December letter or story validates your experiences, and your stories can entertain, help, and motivate others. You owe it to us to write a story. You have no excuse. Stop hiding your light. Have you ever wanted to write a story, publish a story, tell a story? Now you can. Who needs this workshop? Retired women, volunteers, grandparents, caregivers. Did you know there are 50 million retired women all around us? I'm one of them, almost. And they need stories. They need storytelling. They need your stories. If you are a retired woman sitting at home because of the COVID pandemic and you have nothing to do and the chocolate's gone and the wine's gone, write a story. If you're a volunteer for an organization, they need storytellers, especially in this era of Zoom meetings. If you can tell a good story, you can connect to your clients and to other community liaisons who want to hear your story and can benefit from what you're saying. Grandparents, 70 million grandparents in the USA. Do you have stories to tell? Yes, you do. And as a grandparent, some of us haven't been able to see our grandchildren. They're either far away across the country or we haven't been able to see them for other reasons. And we're stuck at home and they're stuck at home. Write them a story. Write a story to that precious grandchild. Who knows if the grandchild will ever see or read it, but you can write it. And caregivers, 44 million caregivers in the USA. When you're taking care of someone, you have to listen to their stories and you have to share your stories with them. I know there are plenty of caregivers who hear the same stories over and over and over, and that's okay. If you can share stories back with your customers or clients or whomever needs your care, this is a blessing for both of you. My mother was in care and I told her stories and she told me stories over and over and we loved it. I'm going to come out of screen share and I want to see out there, how many of you, raise your hand if you can relate to any of these categories. And if you are thinking now of how you're going to write a letter for any of these. So please keep that in mind. And oh, I see hands raised, that's good. And communicate with us if you have an idea. We're going back now to my next slide, which is, this is so good. When an elder is gone, a library burns to the ground. That's an African proverb. And if you think of the stories that you don't have from your ancestors, I live in Idaho, and many of my relatives walked to Idaho on the Oregon Trail in the late 1800s. I don't have their story. They didn't write their stories. They were busy surviving. And I want to know, how did they do it? How did they walk across the desert to get to Idaho and then some went on to Oregon? How did the women handle the food and the clothes for the children? How did the women handle their menstrual periods while walking across the desert for 6 months? These are stories I'll never know. And if you think of your story and how your grandchildren and friends want to know, how did you survive? What did you do? I know you didn't walk across the desert for 6 months, but you may have similar stories you want to share. because everyone has a story. If you stay to the end of my webinar, you'll receive a PDF of the chapter in my book, Midlife Happy Hour. And this chapter talks about storytelling and how to write a story. This book was a finalist for Book of the Year for Humor, and it won some other writing awards. So I'll send you that at the end. Who am I? I'm a published author, best-selling, viral, syndicated blogger, a certified workshop facilitator, and an Idaho farmer's daughter. Yes, I grew up on a potato farm in Idaho, out in the country, near a village of Wendell, Idaho, population 1,000. You've probably been there shopping, or not. But while I was home on the farm, I would spend time in my room. I didn't have any sisters. I had two brothers, but they were off busy working in the fields. And I would write short stories in my Big Chief tablet. And my first publication nationally was at age 11. So I've always been a writer and I love it. I'm a humorous speaker. On my website, it lists some of the speeches that I've given. And I participate in comedy shows called Life Sucks, Laugh Hard. It's true. I've done 12 books, 10 ebooks, and 4 audiobooks. I've also published 3 different ways. And if you want to talk about that later, please email me and we will chat. I've published traditionally with an agent and a New York house. I've self-published and I've published with hybrid, which means the publisher and the writer both share the expenses. And there are pros and cons to all of those. My latest book was released this month. It's called Melody's Magical Flying Machine. And it's about a little girl with Down syndrome. And I wrote this, I was inspired by a little girl I know, and she has Down syndrome, and she would run to me and jump in my lap and beg me to tell her a story. So I wrote her a story. This debuted in #1 in a category on Amazon last week. This is why you write stories, so you can share your knowledge and your creativity with others. I'm in Idaho. We're more than potatoes. Where are you from? If you could write in the chat, and Marilee will help tell me where you're coming from today, please put the state, country, city, whatever.
Okay, we have Las Vegas, baby. We have Atlanta, Georgia, Boise, Idaho. Oh my goodness, Medford, Oregon.
Hi.
Smelterville, Idaho. Look at this. We've got a big Boise contingent here. Gainesville, Virginia, Gig Harbor, Washington, Costa Rica, but she's lived in the US. Fabulous. We have someone from Maine, California, South Dakota, Santa Maria, California. We have a big group from all over.
Hi, everybody.
Idaho. Wow, this is amazing.
Oh, I'm verklempt. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you get something, you will get something out of this, because if you're coming and spending your time to learn how to write your story, that's what we're going to do. So welcome, and let's keep in touch. Enough about me. Who are you? Do you got relevancy? Do you think you're boring? Do you feel invisible? What is your legacy? Many of us women after age 55 or 60 start to think we don't matter anymore. Those of us with empty nests, and we've raised kids for 25 years and they move out. And then we wonder, what do we do now? Well, we can do many things. We can change their bedroom into a writing studio, a craft room, a wine bar. There are so many opportunities. Your journey is rare and marvelous, and it's time to tell and write your story. I love this graphic. It's of a woman looking into an hourglass. And it's like that old soap opera, These Are the Days of Your Life. What are you going to do with the time remaining? We don't know how much we have left. So why don't you start now and write a story? Write 2 stories. Write a book. It's not too late to be what you might have been. Many women and other people too say to me, I wish I had written a book. And I say, well, do it. Go sit down, you're home, write a book, or at least a story. In 1606, Shakespeare's theater closed because of the plague. So he wrote King Lear, Macbeth, and Antony and Cleopatra with a quill, dipping a quill into ink. If Shakespeare can do that, you can write using your laptop. This is how you get inspired to write your story. Anticipate inspiration. It's around us every day, every hour. Keep a notebook handy. I have one in my car, in my purse, by the bed. I often have great ideas right before I go to sleep, and I think I'll remember that in the morning, and no, I don't. So I have a notebook there to jot down some ideas. Observe delightful prompts. Back in the olden days when we were at airports, I used to sit and watch people go by, and I got characters from them. Why is that lady crying? Why is the couple not speaking to each other? Why is that teenager so funny? And I made them into characters, and I remembered their characteristics so I could put them in a story. And once you start writing, scatter words with wild abandon. I don't want you to stop and spell check, edit, put in a comma, put in a question mark, or wonder how you're going to format. You can do that later. Just get the words on paper, spatter them out when the inspiration comes, and then go back and edit. Here are two descriptions. I make soup, which I do. I love to make soup. I create delicious blends of fresh vegetables, savory spices, and homemade broth to please the palate and warm the soul. Which soup do you want? Which description is better? I kind of like the broth one. Benefits of storytelling, mental stimulation. Right now, I'm telling you stories. My mind is going 100 miles an hour because I'm thinking, what am I going to say next? What have I said before? When you're telling a story, you have to be at peak performance in order for that story to be communicated. And it's good to keep mental stimulation, especially as we get older and kind of forget things. Improved memory. When I tell my grandchildren an original story, I often panic because they say, tell it again, tell it again. And I better remember what I said because they'll call me on it. No, the princess didn't fall down the hole. No, that unicorn didn't fly over the rainbow. Telling stories improves your memory because you have to write and tell them again. Positive interaction. I'm telling you a story and I can see your faces lined up there. I hope we're having a positive interaction. And please, if you want to say anything, wave your hand and Marielle will let you in to make a comment or to share your thoughts while we're going through this. When you're telling a story to a community group, to a charity group, the interaction will make you thrive because you are sharing what you know and the stories that you want to tell them. And you're educating and entertaining and amusing. Oh, look, inspiration, creativity, and imagination. This is my precious granddaughter, one of them. And here she is serving tea to Mr. Bear. I believe it. Do you believe it? She believes it. Talk with children, get on their wavelength as far as storytelling and role play and imagination. She knows that Mr. Bear wants more tea when he's done with this cup. That's the kind of inspiration and imagination and creativity that we want to keep in our adult stories. Believe your life matters. Share your unique stories. If you've written a story, send it out. There are anthologies all the time asking for submissions. Reader's Digest has those little blurbs where they want your story. Chicken Soup for the Soul, my goodness, they have submissions every year for a different book. Try to get your story in that. Read what their guidelines are and submit. Newsletters, write a blog, participate in social media and community events. There are many community events that need volunteer speakers, volunteer writers, and for you to help their organization. Give it a try. Your story is like your life. It has a beginning. Yes, you were born. It has a middle. We don't know what's happening. And it will have an ending eventually. Make that middle part magic. What are you going to write about? What do you want to say? Do you remember your childhood? Your teenage years?